She was bleeding into the dirt and her kittens were still crying nearby. It was early afternoon when Mark stepped into the edge of the woods behind Itch's farm in northern Montana. He wasn't looking for trouble, just a few broken branches too meant a fence. The forest was dry, the light sharp shadows cutting across the ground like blades. But then came the sound, not the rustle of deer, not the screech of a bird, a rasping seroy. La, wet, feeding. He froze. Mark followed the sound instinctively, each day's boots moving. Slower, quieter now. 20 yards in, he saw her lying twisted at the base of a slope, fair mattered, eyes open, but distant. A wild bobcat, an adult family. Her breathing was shallow, her sight moved just barely. Dried blood kicked her flank, and fresh wounds cut across her chest. Her back leg was bent round, her mouth opened once, gasped closed, and then he heard a tear again. Not from her. Behind her, faint, igh-pitched. Repeating. Mark moved round the body. Carefully, heart pounding. The smell of copper was heavy in the heat. Each day's hint brushed against a falling rotting clock. And from beneath it, two tiny bobcat kittens, no bigger than each day's palm, blinked toward the light. They shouldn't have been more than 2 weeks old. Their fur was patchy, as barely open ears still caroled. One was weakly crawling forward, the other rooted in place, hit, tilted toward their mud hairs unmoving body. The air round them buzzed with flies, but they didn't flinch. They hadn't yet learned what death smelled like. Mark knelt slow, not wanting to startle them, though they didn't seem capable of fear. The smaller one cried out, a hoarse broken squeak. He looked back at the mother bobcat. Her chest was no longer moving. He understood in that moment what had happened. She had fought, maybe a coyote, maybe something worse. She had defended her litter. She had survived long enough to keep them hidden, to bleed quietly into the roots. And dirt never straying far from their cries. But now she was gone. Mark removed the beach's flannel jacket and laid it gently beside the kittens. When he reached for them, they didn't resist. They didn't even blink. They caroled instinctively into the warmth of the fabric, bodies trembling, bellies empty. He cradled the bundle close, stood up, and turned back toward the trees. The woods were silent again. To our elephant, bobcat kittens, a lifeless mother, and a man who hadn't planned on saving anyone that day. But the forest had made a different choice. He laid the bundle on the kitchen counter, and she stopped mid-step, frozen by the sight of 2 limp spotted bodies, wrapped in each's flannel. Mark, what is that? He didn't answer right away, just unfolded the fabric like he was revealing something secret. The kittens barely moved. One gave a wig to each of its ear. The other made a DRY, broken squeak. Their eyes were sealed shut with crusted residue. Their fur was thin. You could see the shape of their ribs. Here bobcats, he finally said, voice. La. She didn't make it. They were still crying. I told. Each day's wife stepped closely. Her name was Ellen. She'd seen a lot. Feral cats dumped in the cold. Psums hid by cars. Baby raccoons left behind after floods. They lived deep in the hills of rural Montana where trees found terem like needles found magnets. But this wild bobcat kittens was something else entirely. Here too. Young, she whispered. They won't make it. We turned round his logic care. He met her. Ace. We can tell why. She nodded once. No. Debate. No panic. She moved quickly, efficiently, clearing the counter, grabbing soft towels, warming God's milk. On the stuff. She found a syringe, checked the thermometer, took mental. Nowadays, the kind of commonly people have grieved before can hold. They laid the kittens in a shoebox lined with flannel and towels, tucked hat. Water bottles beneath. Their bodies were cold. One soldier even lift its head. Ellen set a cotton подсakt in warm water to wipe the crust from their eyes. Still sealed shut, not even 10 days old. When she offered the first drops of milk, the bigger one latched weakly. The otter refused, too weak to suckle. She didn't push it, just cradled him close to her skin, ripped in soft cloth, and ate it. Every 2 hours that night, they took turns, hitting the water, checking bread, keeping the box quiet and dark. The house, usually still and simple, became an emergency room. No guarantees, just instinct and kindness. At one point, around 3 часа ночи, Mark stood over the box, watching the smaller kitten's chest. Rice, fowl, 10 rice again to slowly. Here wild animals, he said. Here not supposed to be here. Ellen answered without looking up. Here, babies, and here now. In the corner of the room, they're all orange. Barn cat slept curled on a chair. On where that the word beneath her roof. He'd just shifted. There were 2 new lives in this house, and the fight too. Keep terem life had just begun. Morning came without sleep. The cabin smelled faintly of milk and wool. Outside the fog still hugged the fields, and the frost clung to the fence posts. Inside, 2 fragile bobcat kittens stirred beneath a heat lamp. Still, wrapped in the soft blue flannel that now smelled like home. Ellen sat beside Terem, her eyes red but focused. She kept her hand on the smaller Annie's chest. Most of the night, feeling each breath, like it might be the last. But now it was stronger. Subtle, but there the body was warmer. The paws flecked once, a creak on the stairs. Mark quiet, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She looked up. I think the big one is stabilizing. He crouched beside her and the little one. Ellen didn't answer at first. 10. Softly. Is still fighting. They sat in silence a while, just listening to the small rattling breaths. 10 from the outer room, soft padding. 2 cats entered the kitchen. The first was grey and sleek, named Willow. The second. Alder and rounder, was maple, orange. With a pali belly. Just weeks earlier. Both had given birth. Between TRM, day. He'd raised 7 kittens, 4 of whom were already weaned and bounding through the barn, the other 3 still nursing. Ellen set her coffee down and stood. She gently lifted the bobcat kittens into the folded flannel, wrapping TRM loosely like newborns. Let's see what they think, she whispered. They brought the bundle to the sunroom where the cats often rested during the day, warm, quiet, and filled with straw biscuits and soft blankets. Ellen knelt and placed the ripped kittens at the edge of Elo's usual corner. The reaction was instant. Willow stopped mid-step, ears to itching. Maple hissed once, just once, but didn't move Roy. Both cats slowly approached, noses forward, tails slow. They smelled the bundle, circling 18. Slow, measured movements. The bobcat kittens didn't move, but the scent, the warmed, stirred something. The larger one gave a quiet chirp. The smaller raised its head just enough to turn toward the scent of the cats. Willow crouched lower. Her body softened. She sniffed again, closely this time. 10. Without sound, she lay down right beside the bundle. The bobcat kitten reached. Blindly, tiny mouth parting, its paw touched her belly. It wasn't nursing. Not yet. But it had moved perceptibly. Maple sat nearby, watching, guarded, but no longer tense. Ellen didn't breathe. Mark stood in the doorway. Hints on the frame, afraid to interrupt. Whatever was happening, the wild was meeting the domestic. Predator beside. Predator, but something colder, deeper, was speaking louder than instinct. The kitten inched forward again, nas, brushing Elo's fur. It didn't hiss. It didn't claw. It pressed into the warmed, the scent, the safety, and Elo stayed. Not matter, not serged, just there. The first threads of a band had been laid, and for the first time in 2 long days, Hope didn't feel so far away. By the second night, they weren't just tolerated. They were curled in the same box, side by side. 2 tiny bobcat kittens, still blind and frail, nestled against the warm flanks of domestic cats who had no idea they were nursing something wild. Willow lay on her side, her body curved protectively round TRM. One of her own nursing kittens was tucked beneath her front paw. Right beside him, the larger bobcat latched on for the first time. Slow, uncertain, but real. It soccurred. Mouth twitching, paws flicking. Willow didn't move. She only looked down once, blinked, and gently rested her chin across both of TRM. Maple had joined TRM, too, staying nearby, often curling into the same pill. She wasn't nursing. Her milk had mostly dried up, but she licked the kitten's ears and kept TRM warm at night. Mark stood in the doorway, camera in hand, frozen. The light was soft from the old window. Panes, glowing across the flannel nest. Ellen was beside him, whispering, "Don't spook them." But he didn't need reminding. He knew he was watching something secret. That evening, they uploaded a 30-second clip. Nothing edited, no music, just a single shot. A ginger house cat gently licking the crusted face of a sleeping bobcat kitten, while three house kittens and another wild sibling slept beside them. They didn't expect what happened next. Within 12 hours, IT hit a million views. By morning, 3 major accounts reposted. 80 comments poured in. This healed something in me I didn't know was broken. I'm a sobbing. This is what the world should look like. If a cat can love a wild bobcat, which and we love each other. News outlets started calling wildlife centers, teachers, asking permission to show IT to their students. But inside that little house, on the edge of Montana's forest, none of IT changed what mattered most. The two bobcat kittens, once silent, cold, like nearly gone, were now warm, fed, sleeping with others curled round them. They didn't know they were different. They only knew they weren't alone. And as Ellen stood by the box that night, watching Willow stretch one paw protectively over the smallest links, she whispered to herself, "They don't need to match. They just need to matter." By the end of the second week, the difference was impossible to ignore. The bobcat kittens were growing, not fast, but strong. Their ears hit, unfolded fully. Their eyes were now open, pale blue, and always scanning. They still moved cautiously, but their bodies were steadier, thicker. The tremors in their limbs had faded. And then came the moment. The larger one pounced. It wasn't graceful. It was more of a hop and stumble aimed at nothing in particular. But it made contact with a ball of old yarn that had rolled across the floor, and the kitten froze. In surprise, then again, a lip, a bat. With a paw, a tail flick. It had begun. The house was too small for the energy that followed. The kittens, bobcats, and house cats alike were everywhere. In the kitchen, under the table legs, on top of boots, tangled in drapes, Mark stepped carefully now. Ellen moved like a nurse in a nursery ward. Every towel, every ball, every chair hit a sleeping animal, curled somewhere within Mitty. It wasn't chaos. It was life. Eventually, they moved the group to the barn. Not the dusty old side, but the finished heath, where Ellen had once raised our friend lambs. Mark repurposed it for the kittens. He cleaned the floor, sealed every gap, and did hit lamps, ramps, old rooks, and straw. Ellen lined one corner with wool blankets and caught up flannel shirts, soft as down. She placed a wooden crate on its side and filled it with clean hay and clad the new nursery den. They called it the kit. But between themselves, they both referred to it differently. The den. That's where it happened. They started. Climbing. The larger bobcat figured out. How to reach the lowest rung of the. Hello to sing its claws and raw. Will power. The smaller one followed. Slower but determined. At night, they. Curled up inside the crate with the farm. Kittens. The cats had climbed terem. The mothers slept beside terem. Sometimes the kittens so tired. Other times, they simply slept in a pile so dense it was. Hard to tell whose paw belonged to whom. Willow and Maple kept a watchful eye, creaking with a gentle paw when someone beat too hard or climbed too far. There was no distinction anymore. Mark. Would often lean on the barn door and just watch. Ellen would kneel in the straw, a kitten on each tie, her voice barely above a whisper. There was peace in that space. No headlines, no internet, just a family built out of nothing but chance, timing, and the quiet will to care. And in the corner, two once our reformed bobcats playing, graying, and beginning to believe they belonged there. IT started with silence. The larger bobcat kitten was still wrestling with the otters, climbing straw bales, and chasing mouse near the barn windows. But the smaller one, he stopped. No playing, no sounds, no sparkle in each eyes. At first, Ellen thought he was just tired, but by afternoon he refused. The battle. By evening each day's breaths hit. Shortened, and he wouldn't lift each hit. From the nest of flannel. Each day's belly was warm, but not in the right way. Too warm, each day's paws cold. She held him close, wrapped in a towel, listening to the soft ticking of the heat lamp overhead. Mark, she whispered, I think you're losing him. He'd seen enough animals. Go to know the sickness. Shallow breathing, limp limbs, the light fading behind. Those young, unfocused days. Ellen didn't leave each side. She made AT out of towels and tucked AT against her chest under her coat, letting her body warm him. She rocked slightly slowly. One point, she whispered a song, one she hadn't sung in years. She set out a hitting pod near the straw, turned the light low. Then she called for Willow. The old barn cat came, padding soft and slow through the door. No hazard a turn. She walked straight toward Ellen and curled beside her. Then Maple came too, circling once before pressing herself into the other side. The bobcat kitten, though barely conscious, was now wrapped in more than warmed. He was wrapped in presence. No one moved much that night. Ellen dozed in short bursts, waking to check each's chest, still rising, still falling, still here. By morning, he lifted each day's head, weak, groggy, but he lifted it. Ellen sat up straighter, not daring to breathe too loudly. She offered him a drop of milk from her fingertip. He licked once, then again. Each day's paw twitched. He tried to stand and fell. Tried again and managed to wobble. 3 steps, then he stopped, turned, and looked toward the cats. Willow was cleaning her paw nearby. Maple was curled near the crate. He walked past Ellen, past the heat lamp, past the. Outer dish. He made each sla, clumsy way. Across the straw, dragging each body the last few inches, and he pressed each's face. Into a lost sight. Not a plea, not. Confusion, a choice. He bought the her. Gently with which hit, ten collapsed. Against her ribs. She didn't flinch. She simply turned, licked the top of each's. Hit once, and pulled him closely with one paw. It wasn't dramatic. No swelling. Music, just breath, just contact. Just a kitten, a bobcat, remembering who hit. Kept him alive and choosing to go back. To her. By the end of the 6th week, it was clear they weren't just surviving. They were home. The bobcat kittens no longer needed battles every few hours. Their coats had thickened, spotted and golden in the sunlight. Muscles moved beneath their skin now. When they walked, it was with purpose. When they leaped, it was with grace. And still they stayed close. Mark and Ellen had talked quietly for days, often while leaning against the barn door at dusk. The question asked whether the kittens could be released into the wild. It was whether they should. These bobcats had learned how to hunt mouse, not mice. Had learned the arithmetic of a human heartbeat. Had curled up against domestic cats and followed human footsteps to the fence line. Had chosen comfort over fear. They weren't wild anymore. The decision came without ceremony. Mark looked down one morning as the larger bobcat pawed at each's boot, 10. Leaped into the wheelbarrow like a was stage. He turned to Ellen. I guess. Here ours. She smiled so swiftly. We were. Tears the day they made it. From 10 on, the kittens roamed the yard like had been born to it. They wrestled in piles of hay, chased falling leaves, darted through the chicken run like tiny shadows. They climbed the fence posts, perched like sentinels on the railing, ears twitching at the wind.